The following table gives data on new private cars sold in Ireland in each quarter of each year from 2006 to 2011. Let's just look at one particular year. Let's look at 2006. This number here, 75,769, is the number of cars sold in the first quarter of the year 2006. So the first quarter are the months January, February and March. This number here is the number of cars sold in the second quarter of the year 2006. Those are the months April, May and June. Of course, we have 4 quarters in each year. Over here we have the annual total, annual meaning year. So this is the total sales, car sales in Ireland for the year 2006, just got by summing these 4 numbers together. Show the annual total sales of cars over the 6 years using a suitable chart. So what we want to do is plot these 6 numbers here. These are the annual total sales of cars over the 6 years from 2006 to 2011. On the horizontal axis I have the years 2006 to 2011. On the vertical axis I have annual total car sales in thousands. So this point here represents 20,000 cars, this point 40,000. So I'm going up here in steps of 20,000. So I can just fit this on the diagram. So I'm only going to show a fairly rough sketch just to see the trends. Okay, for 2006 the total annual car sales was approximately 173,000. So we have to go up to 173,000. That's midway between once. Let's see now. I have these scales wrong. I must just change this. So we go up to 170,000 approximately, midway between 160 and 180,000 of course. It's about here. In 2007 the sales were 180,754, slightly more than 180, about here. 2008 we have 146,000. That's close to 150, about a quarter of the way between 140 and 160. For 2009 we have 54,000. Just want to put this here. Oops, I have, this should be here. And for 2008 we have 146,000. As I said already, that's about a quarter of the way between 140 and 160. It's about here. For 2009 we have 54,000. It's about here. For 2010 we have 84,907. It's about a quarter of the way between 80 and 100,000. For 2011 we have 86,932, about 87,000, close to 90,000, somewhere about here. So I'm using a trend graph here to see the increases and decreases in sales over the 6 years. In part 2 we want to find the mean number of cars sold per year over the 6 years. So we want the total number of cars sold over the 6 years. That means we want to add up all these numbers, and we want to get the mean number of cars sold by year, so we add up these numbers and divide by 6 because we have 6 years. The total of these numbers, that's the total annual sales for the 6 years, is 726,768. We divide by 6, so the mean annual total number of cars sold per year is 121,128 cars. A part 3. Calculate the percentage increase in annual car sales between 2009 and 2011. So what we need to do first of all is look at the actual increase in car sales. What's the increase in car sales over those 2 years? Well, for 2011 the car sales is 86,932. And for 2009, the car sales were 54,432. So we're talking about annual car sales here. So this is the increase. So that's 32,500 cars. To get the percentage increase, what we have to do is put the increase, which is 32,500, over the annual sales for 2009, which are 54,432. So we're comparing the increase to the sales in 2009. So to turn this fraction into a percentage, we multiply by 100. To one decimal place, we see that the percentage increase in annual cars between 2009 and 2011 is 59.7%. By the way, on this graph, the increase in car sales between 2009 and 2011 is this distance here. So the vertical distance from this point to this point is 32,500. The percentage increase is got by putting this distance over this distance here, which we know is 54,432, and multiplying by 100. So we're comparing this distance to this distance, if you like. Aoife says that this increase shows car sales are currently going well. Paul says that car sales are currently going badly. He says that sales have fallen by 52% since 2007 and that they are well below average. Complete the sentence below to give a criticism of each argument. Well, I've decided to mark in the average car sales for the 6 years, which is 121,128. So Paul says that car sales are well below average. Well, that's correct actually. Before 2008, or up to 2008, car sales were above average. Anyway, we want to see what Aoife's argument does not recognise. Aoife says that this increase in car sales shows that car sales are currently going well. Yeah, it's true there's an increase, but she doesn't recognise the decrease before 2009. So I've just stated what Paul said about sales decreasing by 52% since 2007. You don't have to check this figure, but as an aside, I will just confirm this 52% figure. So what we need to do is look at the sales since 2007. So in 2007, 180,754 cars were sold. 180,754. In 2011, the sales were 86,932. So to get the decrease, I'll subtract 2011 sales, 86,932. So this is the decrease in sales since 2007. So we're talking about decrease from 2007 to 2011. To get the percentage decrease, we put this decrease over the sales in 2007. This will give us the percentage decrease since 2007. So we divide this by 180,754, dividing by this number. Turn this into a percentage, multiply by 100, and to the nearest integer we get 52%, just as was stated. That's just on the side. Now we need to look at what Paul's argument does not recognise. Paul says that car sales are currently going badly. Well, it appears that Paul's argument does not recognise the increase in car sales since 2009. There was actually an increase of 59.7% since 2009. Give a more balanced description of the pattern of car sales over the 6 years. Well, the percentage increase of sales since 2009, which we know is 59.7%, so the increase in sales from this point to this point, the increase in the graph, the percentage increase in the graph is a good sign. But this percentage increase is smaller than the percentage decrease in sales from the year 2007, years 2007 to 2009. There's been a much bigger decrease, percentage decrease actually, in the 2 years prior to 2009 compared to the 2 years after 2009. We could even calculate this percentage decrease. But just looking at the graph, we can see that, the percentage decrease is definitely greater. If we compare this decrease to this height here. Well, let's just do a quick calculation. We can just write in this percentage. The percentage decrease in car sales from 2007 to 2009. So how do we do that? Well, we look at the car sales for those 2 years, 2007 and 2009. In 2007, it's 180,754. In 2009, it's 54432. So this is the decrease in car sales for the 2 years prior to 2009. We divide this decrease by the car sales for 2007, which is 180,754, and we multiply this by 100, and we get 69.8%. I'll round that to the nearest integer, it's 70%. So even though the increase in car sales after 2009 is a hopeful sign, that increase is still quite small compared to the plummet in car sales from 2007 to 2009, 70% drop, which is quite a bit more than the 60% increase. See, we should really compare percentage increases and decreases, not absolute increases and decreases. The percentage increase and decreases give us a better idea of the trends. Part B. Describe how the sales of the cars are distributed over the 4 quarters of each year. Well, let's look at each year. Let's look at 2006. These are the sales for the first quarter. It's January to March. These are the sales for the second quarter, sales for the third, sales for the fourth. You can see there's a steady decrease. It's a constant decrease. The same is true for 2007. This number is smaller than this number is smaller than this number, and this number is smaller than this number. So there's a steady decrease. And that's true for each of the years actually. We can see that these numbers decrease over the 4 quarters of each year. Suggest a reason for this pattern of sales. Well, this is not really a mathematical question, unless you have some knowledge about car sales. It appears that most cars, well, the biggest percentage of cars sold each year are sold in the first quarter of each year. That might have something to do with registering a car. I'm not sure. So I will leave this question blank. The sales for the first quarter of 2012 are 36,081. So we could write that in here for 2012. Sales for the first quarter are 36,081. Find, with justification, an estimate for the total annual sales for 2012. Okay, so we want to estimate this number here. So we need to see if there's any relationship between sales for the first quarter of each year and annual total sales for each year. So if there is a relationship, we can make some stab at predicting what the annual total sales for 2012 are. Well, if we look at this column of numbers and compare it to this column of numbers, we will definitely see a relationship. For example, from 2006 to 2007, there's an increase in car sales for the first quarter, and there's also an increase in annual total sales for those years. We can also look at the years 2007 to 2008. There's a decrease in sales for the first quarter, and there's also a decrease in annual total sales for those 2 years. So whenever there's an increase in sales for the first quarter, there is also an increase in annual total sales. When there's a decrease, as there is for 2007 and 2008, when there's a decrease in sales for the first quarter, there's a decrease in annual total sales for those years. And the same is true if you look down further in this column. From 2008 to 2009, there's a decrease in sales for the first quarter those years, and there's a decrease in annual total sales for those years. Similarly, for 2009 to 2010, there's an increase in sales for the first quarter, and you can see an increase in annual total sales for the last 2 years. You can see an increase in sales for the first quarter, and you can also see an increase in annual total sales for the years 2010 to 2011. So the graph, if we were to show a graph of sales for the first quarter of each of these 6 years, it would parallel this graph here for annual total sales. What I will do is just show a sketch of that. So this blue graph gives the sales for the first quarter of each of these 6 years. And as you can see, when the blue graph is increasing, then the annual sales graph is increasing. When the quarterly sales graph is, or the first quarter sales graph is decreasing, the annual sales graph is decreasing. And we have an increase here as well. I must put in 2011, which is 39,484. It's very close to 40,000. So we see an increase here. And also I can put in 2012, which is 36,081. So that's actually a decrease. So there's a decrease in sales for the first quarters of the years 2011 and 2012. 39,484 decreases to 36,081. So that's about here. About a quarter of the way between 20,000 and 40,000. So actually I must put it here. 36,000 is about 3/4 of the way between 20,000 and 40,000. So that's a decrease, slight decrease. So this is 2012. So in this question, we have to get an estimate for the total annual sales for 2012. Now, since there's a decrease in sales for the first quarter for the years 2011 to 2012, it's a very slight decrease, we might expect a decrease in annual sales as well, because the trend has been the same for both graphs up as far as 2011. So maybe that trend will continue for the year the years 2011 to 2012. We might expect a decrease in annual sales as well. So you can just maybe extend this graph onto some point. The choice of this point is fairly arbitrary, of course, but don't make it too extreme. Of course, we can't really predict what will happen, but we would expect a decrease, like we have a decrease here, a slight decrease here. So for our estimate of annual sales for 2012, you could just pick a number that's somewhat less than 86,932. You might pick 80,000. So here's the justification. It might be helpful to draw a graph of sales for the first quarter. Both graphs follow the same trend, as I explained before. When one graph is increasing, the other one is increasing. When one graph is decreasing, the other graph is decreasing. We expect annual sales for 2012 to be less than for 2011. Okay, I've explained that already. Since sales for the first quarters of each year decrease. So we can see the sales for the first quarters. I've explained that already. So that's a good enough justification for choosing this value of 80,000. Just some number that's slightly smaller than 86,932.